Data protection and privacy teams are under more pressure than ever with new laws, AI oversight, data breaches, and the constant expectation to do more with fewer resources.
That's why TrustArc built a modern privacy and data protection management platform powered by Arc Intelligence. It unifies your tools, automates the work that slows you down, and surfaces what matters most right when you need it.
From guided quick actions to our intelligent assistant, Ask Arc, you get credible, contextual answers backed by expert research, not generic AI guesses.
Finally, privacy that works the way privacy pros work.
Learn how TrustArc helps teams move faster with confidence at trustarc.com/serious-privacy. That's trustarc.com/serious-privacy.
You're listening to Serious Privacy, powered by TrustArc. Here are your hosts, Paul Breitbart, Ralph O'Brien, and Dr. Kay Royal.
Hello, it's all three of us again. We are complete. The team is complete, and we thought it is a good week to give you an update on a lot of stories that we discussed earlier in the year, or new stories that relate to what we discussed earlier in the year. So be mindful of PayOK coming through, of TikTok in all kinds of jurisdictions, AI chatbots and frontiers, and what have you. Without further ado, my name is Paul Breitbart.
My name is Ralph O'Brien.
And I'm Kay Royal, and welcome to Serious Privacy. I'm excited to have the three of us together, but this is why we invited Ralph to join us, right? Because we couldn't seem to always get together.
Well, and even with the three of us, we couldn't seem to get all of us together.
This is true.
We made it work somehow.
Unexpected question. If you were famous or infamous, what would you be famous for?
For privacy, of course. For making the Serious Privacy podcast. What else?
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay, wait a minute. I didn't like that. Let me go find another. Okay, other than privacy, what would you be famous for? Other than cooking and house remodeling.
Now you're making it really difficult.
I'm making it really difficult. Hold on. We're going to go find another. Here we go. 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. Which decade do you love the most and why? Or another decade.
I'm going to go straight in on this one. 90s were my teen years. Yeah, generally speaking, it's the 1990s that is going to be the one that will stand out for me. I think most people, when they're in their late teens, is the kind of the music and the culture and going out and living life on your own terms for the first time. Late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to agree. We're the same generation, I think. So it's, also for me, late 90s, early 2000s.
Y'all are. I'm an 80s.
Music-wise, I might be tempted by the 80s.
Yeah, I'm an 80s teen. I graduated high school in 86. We're about to have our 40th class reunion next year. So I am an 80s girl through and through. I did the parachute pants and the Huey Lewis little hat and everything, and the long earrings and the Michael Jackson and the Cyndi Lauper. And the flash dance. Oh, yeah, I'm an 80s girl, people. Down hard. That's it. I'm an 80s girl.
Curious to see those pictures of you with Cyndi Lauper hair.
I do have a few horrible pictures that should be deleted from all humanity.
90s and 2000s was the mullet.
They haven't disappeared from The Hague. The Hague is traditionally famous for mullets. So you will still find a lot of people here who wear them and wear them with pride.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Must make
Jealous?
sure that I'll come to the Hague. I'm just grateful I've got my hair back. There we go.
Fair enough. So let's start to take a look at the first stories of this week. Ralph, you had a just-in decision from one of the UK courts.
Yes. Most people know that whilst the Information Commissioner's Office issues findings as the regulator, there is something called the First Tier Tribunal, which you can go to if you don't like them. So in May 22, the Commissioner issued Clearview AI, our old friend's 7.5 million enforcement notice for scraping images of people in the UK from websites and social media and uploading it to their global database so they're viewed by facial recognition for US law enforcement or, in fact, any US customer. global customer of Clearview AI. So the first tier tribunal, people might remember, overturned the ICO decision, saying that because Clearview AI was in the US and they were selling products and services not to people in the UK, but they were selling them to US law enforcement, they fell outside territorial scope and overturned the ICO decision. The ICO appealed that to what we call the upper tier tribunal. And the upper tier tribunal has come back today and said that the first tier tribunal was wrong and the commissioner's decision stands. So the Clearview's processing impersonation is related to the monitoring of behavior of UK residents.
Take that.
So even if they're not targeting products and services at UK residents, they are taking their photos off websites and passing them to US law enforcement, is still monitoring their behavior, which I think was the argument we made at the time. Pleased to be vindicated there. Clearview's processing does not fall outside the reach of UK data protection law on the basis that it provided services to foreign law enforcement, and that the first tier tribunal applied the law incorrectly in saying that it was outside the material scope. Some good words from the ICO saying that it gives greater confidence to people in the UK that the ICO can and will act on their behalf on their May 2022 $7.5 million fine on Clearview AI. Of course, Clearview might well appeal the UT's decision. Clearview in the past has, let's say, been resistant to deal with fines from European regulators. Clearview has indeed been fined by a couple of regulators for not responding or cooperating with the regulators.
Right.
Because it maintains the fact it's a business outside of the scope of European laws.
They can argue that all they want. That's a stupid argument. It's not going anywhere. Nice.
It's interesting that Clearview challenged the fine they received in the UK by saying, hey, the fine doesn't apply to us, whereas in the Netherlands, they even refused to contest the sanction that was imposed on them. You would expect a consistent reasoning from a company like that, and apparently it's not.
Maybe one of their lawyers went to work for a regulator, and so they have a new lawyer. And by the way, I had no idea if one of their lawyers went to work for a regulator or not. That just seems to be a trend that we're seeing for the companies that are getting in trouble a lot.
Hey, let's not talk about the Irish DPC then, if we're talking about people who work at companies going to work for regulators. Right. I understand their third commissioner is ex-Meta, or am I wrong there?
No, I think you're correct.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens there, I'm sure.
But to be fair, after years of an investigation with the regulator, they do become your best friend, right?
That is interesting. I remember being at Jersey with you.
Jersey, I've heard they're sketchy.
It's GPA, and remember having a conversation between the three of us and Alex Hanff that we'd actually managed to avoid watching a TikTok until we ended up at the GPA, which was sponsored by what? So there we go. That's a nice segue into TikTok.
Yeah, there we go.
So there we go. My news on TikTok is to do with the Irish regulator, the DPC, who have found that TikTok infringed Article 13, that's the information to be provided directly to the data subject, because of international data transfers, including how the processing will have remote access to data stored in Singapore and data stored in the US by personnel based in China. So what we're actually saying here is not the data has been taken to China, but of course there is access from China to the Singapore and the US-based data. And as we all know, under the snappily titled interplay between Article 3 and Chapter 5 EDPB guidance, access also counts as processing. The DPC have exercised corrective powers, though actually, interesting enough, not in terms of financial penalty, and not in terms of administrative fine, but they're talking about an order requiring TikTok to suspend the data transfer, an order requiring TikTok to bring their processing into compliance, which makes sure that any data located in China, including the remote access solution, must cease being processed immediately So there we go.
And processing includes storing, people. So when you are ordered to cease processing, that includes no storing of the data.
Or accessing from that jurisdiction as well.
Absolutely.
But TikTok's had a lot of fun over on this side of the world lately. So in September was such a sexy month for privacy, people. We have gobs and gobs of stories coming out. How can we possibly get them all to you? But let's start with TikTok. So in Canada, on I think near the end of September, third week of September, Canada regulators determined that TikTok's child data protection is inadequate. It was an investigation.
Surprise.
They have collected sensitive personal information from a large number of Canadian children and used it for online marketing and content targeting. Say it's not, okay, sorry, I'm apparently a little spicy this morning. So they have to introduce measures to do all this, blah, blah, blah. But however, around the same time, the United States executive order, what number? I'm looking for which one it was. I can't find the number. Came out on September 25th, titled Saving TikTok While Protecting National Security. And it is calling it the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act. Public Law 118.50 regulates foreign adversary controlled applications, specifically those operated by TikTok and any other subsidiary of its China-based parent company, ByteDance, on national security grounds. Goes through all this woolabaloo about how they have the authority to make any of this. But at the end, it says that a plan was presented to the president to undergo a qualified divestiture of TikTok's United States operation as outlined in the framework agreement. The application will be operated by a newly established joint venture based in the U.S. It will be majority owned and controlled by United States persons, will no longer be controlled by a foreign adversary, since ByteDance and its affiliates will own less than 20%, with the remainder being held by certain investors. The new joint venture will be run by a new board of directors and subject to rules that appropriately protect Americans' data and our national security. Accordingly, and this is in here, accordingly, I have determined that the proposed divestiture would allow the millions of Americans who enjoy TikTok every day to continue using it while also protecting national security. So it goes through all of this stuff and everything. And when does this have to do?
Mid-January 2026.
Yep, that's what I was thinking, is 4 months, right?
It is, but what the executive order doesn't tell you and what the newspapers do tell you is that those investors are mainly software giant Oracle. Billionaire Larry Ellison is the founder or co-founder of that, and a good business partner of President Trump. Similarly, Rupert Murdoch is one of the investors behind it through Fox Corporation. And the Emirati investment fund, MGX, is also expected to join the coalition.
Yep.
And MGX is also investing heavily in cryptocurrency founded by the Trump family. So this all sounds a little bit, may I call it incestuous?
Yeah, you can. I think you can, really. I think you can. Yeah. So this is going to be interesting. And this has been after a series of extensions for TikTok being divested before. So it's interesting. It was necessary for this executive order because the previous extension was set to expire. He's extended it 3 times after it initially went into effect 1 day before he took office. So this will at least call a halt to these continued extensions for TikTok. But on the other hand, seriously, are we really going to be any better off?
Yeah, I mean, there's some interesting questions here about globalization versus localization. And nearly everything I see in the news at the moment is about sovereignty versus large corporations that can act as they like, regardless where they are on the planet. Over here, there's been another news story about Apple, for example. The government, which apparently the UK government, which dropped its request of Apple that meant that Apple removed encryption from UK users. Again, the government has targeted to UK Apple users with a new demand for data.
Of course.
So again, we're seeing these sort of rows here, which is tech giant versus governments. This time, again, looking at the US Trump administration, there is some protectionist words here, especially from the president, because, what he perceives to be an attack on the success of US business operating overseas, which is ironic when you look at what they're doing to TikTok. There are some really interesting conversations about where is state bigger than company? Is company bigger than state? I've always said you look at the funding of, say, someone like Meta or TikTok or the equivalent compared to, say, a national regulator, here, the ICO, for example. But it doesn't make them a particularly attractive target because we'll see you in court. You look at even Clearview AI, that there is this sort of money. Does money make right? Does might make right? Does national interests overcome trade interests? Does human interests overcome national interests? Yeah, this is what we're seeing in nearly every story and what we have to deal with today, which I find fascinating.
I do call a bunch of skepticism on this deal because it says the investors will own 65%, ByteDance will own less than 20%. That's still 15% unaccounted for. And there were no owners of ByteDance present at the signing. It was Trump who led the negotiations, and he and Chinese president are the ones that signed the papers for the deal. So it's interesting. Someone's going to have some fun getting to the bottom of that.
Isn't the Chinese presidency the owner anyway?
Yeah, but there you go. Exactly. But it is going to be interesting how this comes to play, right? Because I have a feeling that someone just set up their retirement plan.
Well, there is that. Talking about divergence between different countries, I think Paul and I have probably got something to talk about there as well. Going back to Meta, the Information Commissioner's Office over here put out a statement on what is essentially pay or okay. So as you know, in Europe, Facebook's been operating pay or okay for a while, but with three options, essentially. An option to pay, an option with targeted advertising, and an option with less targeted advertising, as I understand it. Over here in the UK, they've just come up with a slightly cheaper version on the continent, a slightly cheaper pay or okay. So it's $2.99 in Great British pounds, but only one other option, which is your direct marketing, advertising, fully targeted data vampirism model. The ICO agrees that this is legal. The ICO agrees that it moves Meta away from targeting ads, and the ICO have been clear that targeting ads is not in line with ICO law, and they're pleased that Meta has given them transparency and choice. But the ICO recognizes that businesses, however, need to operate commercially, and therefore people being able to choose between consenting personalized ads or a monthly subscription for an ad-free service, consent or pay, the ICO supports that model, but they will continue to monitor Meta's service changes and the broader impacts of consent or pay models to ensure consumers are empowered to make choices and are able to give their consent freely. And this is the crux of the matter. Is the alternate option of paid for versus consent, in inverted commas, freely given consent? Certainly, I think the European view, and this is where I'll hand over to Paul for the Dutch judgment here under the DSA, I think would beg to differ.
Yes, I was just looking because you said there are three options. I think we also only have two options in the apps. You can use it for free with advertisement, or you can subscribe to use Meta's apps without advertisement, but indeed for $7.99 a month for Europe. I guess that's because it's all of Europe compared to the tiny British islands, but maybe that's how they think. I don't know, but it's $7.99. And even if you say I don't want advertisement, there is still some personalization and tracking going on. So it is not the full privacy-friendly mode that the regulators have been asking for. Last week, on the 2nd of October, the Court of First Instance in the Netherlands has ruled in a case brought by Bits of Freedom, which is the Dutch civil rights NGO, against Meta. And Bits of Freedom demanded that Meta allows their users in apps like Instagram and Facebook the option to have a timeline that is not based on profiling. By default, all the people you follow in a chronological order instead of all the profiling that you get and random posts that are just showing up. So it should be also a persistent choice and not that every time that you open the app, you need to select again to get that chronological timeline.
I believe that's one of the selling points for services like Blue Sky,
Right.
that they say that whatever anyone posts just comes onto your feed in chronological order,
Yeah.
as opposed to being algorithmically determined or altered in any way based on advertising content.
But that would impact the influencers who live by those algorithms, right?
It would. Influencers, advertisers, it would influence them. But the court held that indeed the EU Digital Services Act makes that recommender systems may exist, but there should always be a persistent choice possible, meaning that the users have autonomy, freedom of choice, and control over the way in which information is presented to them. I posted this on LinkedIn immediately as I saw the news come in, and I also made a link to Pay or OK here. And not everybody follows why I did, because it's not explicitly mentioned in the case. But I think if the court goes as far to say, you need to have a timeline available to you that is not based on profiling and that is not algorithmic, that also has an impact on Pay or OK, because it means that users will always have to have the opportunity to have an advertisement-free or a profiling-free timeline, which means that it shouldn't be something for which you pay €7.99 in euros every month, but it's something that should be available by default. So for me, this case also has a direct link with the Pay or OK developments. Others may differ, but I think that is also where, if more cases are brought here in the Netherlands, what we would see happening. I'm in any case hopeful that is what we will see happening. Obviously, Meta will appeal this decision. They are due to pay a monetary fine if they do not meet the requirement. They have about 2 weeks to implement the persistent timeline. And looking up the money. So Meta has 2 weeks to adjust their apps for the Dutch market to make sure that the persistent choice for a chronological timeline is possible. If they don't, they have to pay Bits of Freedom a monetary penalty of €100,000 a day with a maximum of €5 million.
Wow.
Also important, this goes to the NGO itself and not to the Dutch state. So there is a lot of good they can do with that money, obviously. Meta is fundamentally disagreeing with the judgment, and they also think this is something for the European Commission and the European courts and not for low-level courts in the member states.
Interesting.
Low-level courts in the member states. That's an interesting question, isn't it? So Meta is essentially saying that only the CJEU, the Court of Justice of the European Union, should be able to issue decisions that affect them rather than those tiny little nation states.
Oh, those pesky little nation states, right?
Well, that's not the first time that they do that. They've also said that petty European Data Protection Board has nothing to say about them in cases against Ireland. It's only the European Court, like it's the US Supreme Court, that's the only one that should be.
And if that's the only one that can listen to their issues, then that cuts out a lot of their legal costs, too, of fighting court cases in these pesky little member states.
No, it doesn't, because you cannot just go to the European Court of Justice. You have to go through the member states to end up.
Yeah, they're saying that they're the only ones, and if they were, then they couldn't do it. But it just doesn't work that way. Sorry, that's not how the legal system works. We apologize for that.
Oh, I've also just seen another one literally just popped up on my timeline, and I don't know if Paul's seen this one yet, but the Amsterdam Court of Appeal recent decision in the TikTok WAMCA case. overturned a first instance ruling to declare claims for non-material damage to be admissible and bundleable. So a good step forward for collective redress, especially for privacy and data-related litigation in the Netherlands. This is about damage or distress. Again, on TikTok, looks at data protection and the ability to bring what the US would call a class action. Yeah, just another one to bring to everybody's attention.
Yeah, and there are actually multiple cases against TikTok ongoing, but the Take Back Your Privacy claim is probably one of the biggest one because it's also supported by the National Consumers Organization and lots of other NGOs. And indeed, the Dutch court is competent to decide on any claims for damages that have not been directly based on the GDPR, but there are more grounds in this case for the mass claim. So it will continue. It doesn't mean that the GDPR claims are ruled out. That is something that still needs to be decided, but there the Court of Justice of the European Union has been asked for clarifications, so that will need to be explained first. So let's talk a bit about AI before we wrap up. It's a quick shout out to the Dutch Data Protection Authority and the Dutch Consumers and Markets Authority. They have posted an op-ed in the Financial Daily in the Netherlands claiming that a lot of companies are now implementing AI chatbots in customer service, which may be useful, but also stressing that the chatbots cannot replace humans in customer service. It should always be possible to have a human on the phone or in the chat or via email, but a real person who can help you instead of just an AI bot. And that is also something that will be included, very likely, in new consumer legislation in the EU called the Digital Fairness Act that will probably be presented in the course of 2026. But there is a lot of people complaining currently with the supervisory authorities that they're unable to get an actual human to talk to them instead of a chatbot. So also, it should not just be possible, it should also be easy to reach a human.
Yeah, and it should be.
I agree with that.
Right.
My 94-year-old grandmother, who I've mentioned many times on this podcast, doesn't use a mobile phone, doesn't use a computer, and every time she phones up her doctor's surgery has got to sit through 25 minutes of this is why you should use the app and this is why you should look everything online and this is why we should do all this triage via this, that and the other, only to speak to a person. I get the fact that businesses, of course, want to save money. In fact, I've had this myself. Fun enough, this week I put in a subject access request against an insurance company and was met with, in fact, it wasn't just a subject access request. I actually hit them with nearly every request from Article 12 to 23. And what came back to me was, thank you for your subject access request without reference to the others. So that immediately had my back up. And then they required me to try and log in on a portal and speak to a chatbot in order to progress my request, which was met with short shrift, shall we say.
Shall we say short shrift? Can we say short shrift?
Rather than use their, and I'm not going to say which vendor it was, their portal, which they wanted me to log in and deal with them all through their portal.
Is that vendor green by chance?
Yep. I said that no, I was not going to be using such a thing and you could not require me to. So,
I will say that anecdotally, we're hearing more and more about individuals using data subject access requests, whether it's in the US, EU, UK, wherever, as essentially pre-litigation discovery to find out everything the company has on them before they file an official complaint or a lawsuit. And I thought it was the ICO came out with guidance that if it was clear that the requester was not using it for data protection or privacy concerns, and they were using it as a pre-litigation discovery, you could decline their request because it's about data protection and privacy. And if they don't have questions about how their data is handled and they're using it as pre-discovery, it shouldn't be presented. But I can't find it. If anyone out there listening actually finds it, holler at me.
The answer is yes and no. You can say no to somebody if it's manifestly unfounded, i.e. not for a data protection reason, but they're also purpose blind, which means if the individual does not say the purpose, you can't then claim it's manifestly unfounded because all they're saying is I'm exercising my rights and they don't have to give you a purpose.
Exactly. It was interesting because I would love to be able to put guidance out there that says one of the things you can do is that if it is clear that they're doing it for a non-privacy or data protection reason, that you can tell them that. Say it does not appear that you have any privacy or data protection concerns. However, the laws in other countries are not predicated on that. So the U.S. doesn't have a requirement for it to be for a privacy purpose. So it's just their right to their data, which I guess gets rid of all the middle noise. But back on the AI, back on the chat box, by the way, if you don't know that the U.S. has litigation around chatbots using it as wiretapping under age-old wiretapping laws, you've missed a big piece of chatbot legislation and legal activity. So it's very interesting how it does that. And then in AI, so Governor Newsom has signed the California, what is the official name? Is Senate Bill 53, Transparency and Frontier Artificial Intelligence Act with TFAIA, TAFIA. I don't think that's going to have a new one. I think they're just going to call it the Frontier A.
The Toffee law.
The Toffee law. There you go. Oh, I like that. My question was always why Frontier, which this was explained early on, but Frontier because they are the most advanced, powerful, and computationally intensive AI models that are pushing the boundaries of current technology. So they're trying to address this technology as it's evolving. It's evolving rapidly. And it's going to civilization level technology, trying to balance innovation with public safety and trust, which, by the way, is completely capable of being done. So if you haven't looked at the California Frontier AI law, please go make sure that you look at that. We'll put a link to that here. We're not going to discuss it across the board, although I have a feeling towards the end of the year, which, by the way, we're in the last quarter, we will probably pull out a session on AI laws around the world, just like we normally do with state privacy laws, to give you a roundup of everything that's happened in 2026. But this one is focusing on transparency, innovation, safety, accountability, especially protecting whistleblowers, and responsiveness. So the California Department of Technology will annually recommend appropriate updates on this. And so if you haven't been paying attention to that one, you should. That is one you should absolutely pay attention to as well. What else do we have? I don't think I have anything else on AI. I do have a few other things here in the U.S. The SEC is actually looking into claims that a company, let me see if I can get the name of this company, AppLovin, a mobile technology company called AppLovin. It was in response, again, to a whistleblower complaint. They're looking into claims that the company violated service agreements to provide consumers with more targeted advertisement. So this has taken the SEC's authority a little further down the road. So are we going to start seeing the SEC come out as a privacy regulator? They have the materiality, the cybersecurity, all of this. For those unfamiliar with the U.S., SEC is the Security and Exchange Commission, so they're the agency that oversees publicly traded companies. In New York, cybersecurity alert, financial regulators ordered urgent fixes to zero-day Cisco vulnerabilities threatening financial systems. They are providing strict timelines on that. The FTC charged Iconic Heart with unlawfully collecting children's data, violating COPPA, tricking teens into paid subscriptions, just tricking people into paying stuff. I fall victim to it at 11:30 at night when I can't sleep and I'm playing, Hatchet or something, and it's about to take away all my rewards and I have to go spend money to buy 200 more coins so I can keep playing the game. I'm not going to tell you how much I spent on this app last night because I couldn't sleep. We know it's there for a reason. What else actually hit the news over here? We had something on Brazil adequacy. I think we talked about it before. Oh, let's do that. We had an episode that stepped outside our normal processes and talked about the human interest, human rights fundamental in Israel. And just 2 weeks after that, I believe it was, Microsoft denied the request that was made to have the information, to have access to the information. So I was pleased to see that. Ralph, Paul, do y'all remember anything specific about that came out?
Yeah, Microsoft concluded after an internal investigation that the Israeli Defense Force and the Israeli Secret Service were actually storing data and using Microsoft servers for purposes that were not agreeable to Microsoft, related also to the Gaza occupation. And Microsoft said, this is not in line with our agreements, so this is not allowed, so you should stop doing that. That was reported by The Guardian. We don't know if in the interim everything has also stopped, whether that's been verified or not. That's probably also not something that we will ever know, but important to indeed confirm that Microsoft has said, no, we don't want anything to do with this.
Exactly.
We don't want the Gaza occupation on our plate.
No, we can go to Nigeria. There is back to Facebook. Sorry, we started with Facebook and Meta. We're going to end with Facebook and Meta. Let's hope not. Nigeria has a potential settlement with Facebook, nearing a settlement in a $33 million lawsuit brought by the regulators that they violated the law. Lawyers recently informed a judge they were in advanced stages of negotiation. They still face a $220 million fine from Nigeria's Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission for multiple and repeated, as well as continuing infringements of the country's data protection and competition laws. So way to go, Nigeria.
I have one more follow-up from last week. Now, last week we talked digital identity cards. And we had an interesting conversation about digital identity cards. And it's just been reported that in Switzerland, they've had a national vote on electronic identity cards. In fact, the second nationwide ballot on the issue. The idea was rejected in 2021 over data protection concerns and unease about the proposed system being largely run by private firms as opposed to the government. There was a revised proposal put in Switzerland where the system would remain optional and in public hands, with the data stored on smartphones rather than on a central database. So local distributed storage rather than centralized storage. And this goes in dovetail with what we were talking about last week when the UK government was talking about plans to introduce its own digital ID. The Swiss government recommends a yes vote. Citizens can choose freely. And as we understand it, it's about 50-50. Early projection of the voting suggests a 50-50 split over the issues, making the final result expected late on Sunday. That's Sunday the 12th. That's when it's expected to be. Too close to call. For the moment, 50-50 opinion polls heading into the referendum. It'll be interesting to keep an eye on that and gain the update of what the Swiss decide, especially as it'll have a bearing on wider discussions across the EU and, of course, wider here in the UK as well.
Yeah, and on that topic of digital identity, not really a data protection topic, but good to warn people that indeed also as of October 12, the European Union will start rolling out the entry-exit system. And they will take 6 months to fully roll it out, but now we finally go live. And that means that non-EU nationals will be registered at the border with fingerprints, with a picture, and other biometrics like you would otherwise have in the UK, in the US already. But this will be introduced now. So that's something that Kay will probably have to go through when she goes to the UK. No, she also goes to Europe.
Yeah.
So when she comes over in November, she may need to use the entry-exit system. Following that, in the last quarter of 2026, we also get the European Travel Information and Authorization System, ETIAS, which is similar to the US ESTA authorization that needs to be requested before traveling, which has also already been introduced in the UK, I believe 6 months ago.
Yeah.
So also there, lots of data collection by governments.
That's what you need to be most worried about. Government, right? Let's be most worried about every 10 years it flip-flops. You're more worried about private companies. In the next decade, you're more worried about the government. I think we're clipping back to the government now.
So the EU will be changing its motto from Sans Frontières to Avec Frontières, right?
With strong outside borders, but internally, of course, apart from those countries that suspend Schengen, which is almost all countries by now, we don't do borders. We only do borders when we feel like it.
And with what?
So on that note,
that was Serious Privacy.
This wraps up our podcast for this week. Please do share the episode with your friends and colleagues because we love to get more listeners. And join the conversation on LinkedIn or on Blue Sky. You'll find us under Serious Privacy on both platforms. You'll find Kay as Heart of Privacy, Ralph as IGR O'Brien, and myself as Europol B. Until next week, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye, y'all.
If you're a data protection or privacy professional, you already know the pressure. Non-stop regulatory change, AI oversight, internal demands, and the expectation to somehow stay ahead of it all. And the old patchwork of tools just isn't cutting it anymore.
No, that's why TrustArc created a modern privacy management platform powered by Arc Intelligence. The TrustArc platform brings your workflows, evidence, research, tasks, and applications all together in one unified and intelligent workspace so you don't waste time digging, clicking, or context switching.
With Ask Arc, your privacy assistant, you can ask plain language questions about laws, jurisdictions, or even your own program data and get credible, cited answers based on NIMBY research and more than 1,000 global laws. It's explainable, transparent, and purpose-built for data protection and privacy.
So if you need to add a vendor, create a cookie banner, or start an assessment, quick actions take formally complex tasks, turn them into bite-sized guided workflows to save you time.
It's a platform that thinks like you, works like you, and helps you move faster with confidence, whether you're a seasoned DPO or you're just getting started.
See how modern privacy gets done. Explore Arc at trustarc.com/serious-privacy. That's trustarc.com/serious-privacy.